And just one last time, folks, before we start, for those of you who have just arrived, there's a short data capture survey in there that I would be very appreciative if you take a few moments just to complete that while we're getting underway. The link is shared in the chat, bit.ly/calc survey, bit.ly/calc survey. And just to let you see some of the information that we're getting. Here we see you all being mapped on a little map. This is, for those of you who are geography teachers, I absolutely couldn't miss the opportunity of using a little bit of GIS with you. So the little survey that you've just completed is a survey 123. And if you're a geography teacher and fancy using this with your classes to collect some data, it really is that easy. And this is what you get as a result of this. It maps it in real time. So we're seeing where we're all coming from. CALC is very well represented here today. Good stuff, good stuff. But it is wonderful to welcome all of you from all across Northern Ireland. Let me just zoom out a little bit more to see if we do have anybody from any further. Tony, we definitely need to get you to fill one of these surveys in before you're done. Love a little dot over there. I will do that, of course. So I'm not disturbing my screen because everything's working. Of course, of course. Of course. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I make that just 1:45 now, so we will absolutely make a start. And I would like to extend a very, very warm welcome to the very first inaugural CALC Teaching and Learning Group Teaching and Learning webinar, which was always far too much of a mouthful. So what else would we call it other than Houl on in good old Northern Irish fashion? An opportunity for us to reflect and to think back a little bit of what's been going on these crazy number of months, and in order for us to share together and maybe pick up one or two ideas. We're very excited to be hosting this today in CALC, and as I just said, very warm welcome to any teachers from the CALC area, but we absolutely wanted to extend this out across the whole of Northern Ireland and beyond. And I know that there is somebody who have just admitted who'll be bringing us a little dot from England very soon. So that's wonderful to see. You're all very welcome, whether you're near or far. It's wonderful that this technology enables us and allows us to do what we're doing here today. Just a couple of quick thanks to begin with. Can I say thank you to my colleagues in the CALC Teaching and Learning Group who said, why not, whenever I pitched the crazy idea of doing something in June like this after the year that we've just had. We are absolutely delighted with the response to this. We managed to sell out twice, which speaks wonderful and very warm, very strongly about the continuing desire from teachers in Northern Ireland to continue this process of sharing together. Could I just ask, please, that you check that the mics are muted, folks, so that we don't get any noise pollution popping in with that? That would be great. Thanks. Also want to say, and I'll hand over to Paul with this, a massive thanks to Paul Crow, my colleague from EA, who has been working with us all behind the scenes to make this happen. So Paul, I'm just going to hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, Alistair. Delighted to be here and so excited to kick things off. I work with EA, as Alistair has already mentioned, as part of the School Development Service across Craigavon and the wider Southwest locality. And today is the culmination of many months of conversation and dialogue. I'd like to thank the Craigavon school community and staff for extending a warm invite to colleagues across Northern Ireland and beyond. And I hope this inaugural event is the first of many within Craigavon ALC and perhaps acts as a catalyst for other ALCs to share their own practice going forward. And to quote John Meehan, who I'm often quoting, the most valuable resource that all teachers have is each other. And without collaboration, our growth is limited to our own perspectives. A quote that very much reflects that the whole is something besides the parts. I just want to invite colleagues as well. Alistair's been doing it for some time now, for the last 15 or so minutes, that there is a short link to a survey. It's an online GIS survey. I think it's a geographer's dream. And one of the last questions asks you to add one word in response to, I suppose, summing up or resonating most with you in describing the past year. I considered adding the word loss. It is powerful, it is emotional, and for me, perhaps personal. But equally powerful is the word opportunity. And perhaps the worst possible loss is lost opportunity. Is a return to normal classroom practice a loss for our children, our young people, and ourselves? I believe all too often in education, we begin with the what and the how, but today we begin with the why. Why do we do what we do? And why would we forego a once in a lifetime opportunity to embed the astounding response to COVID in our virtual classrooms? Alistair, Tony, it's over to you.
Thank you. Alistair, do you want to say anything before I pitch?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Paul. And there's the words that you have put into your survey so far. Surprise, surprise, the big one in blue. And yet again, a wonderful opportunity for us to be thinking today how we might continue to raise and rise up to meet those challenges. Tony, I'm very indebted for you to join with us today. Tony and I first met online maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And have very much found that we're kindred spirits, and we've been able to share some wonderful exchanges together just in terms of learning lessons from lockdown. Tony is an author of the book Lessons from Lockdown. He's also about to author another book, but I'll not steal too much of your thunder on that. Suffice to say at this stage, it's wonderful to have you with us, Tony, and I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
It's great. And if I go through till about 4:10, and then maybe we'll have some questions. And if people want to put questions in the chat or whatever, we'll certainly try and work through those. But I mean, first of all, 2 things. Thank you for inviting me to contribute. We've held for both of the books a number of focus groups, and the focus group that we held with a number of you who are in the room tonight last week was frankly a revelation. It was fantastic. The sort of collaboration, the collegiality, the spirit, the innovation, the creativity. And I guess it's those things that out of all the loss, because nobody would have chosen a pandemic to spur this kind of stuff, but we must, it seems to me, hold on to it. And Paul, really, you gave us the perfect segue there, because you talked about the loss of simply returning to the classrooms we had before. And those who were in the focus group last week will know that across both books, we've finished every focus group with the same kind of double question. I'm a sociology teacher by background, and I kept telling my students not to ask double questions, but I have finished each focus group with one, and it's this. Thinking back to schooling before lockdown, I simply ask, what can't you wait to get back to? And what can't you wait to leave behind? Because if we don't have the courage to leave some stuff behind, we won't have any room to accommodate all the fantastic innovation and development that we've undergone individually, personally, professionally over the last 15 months or so, which doubtless well, certainly as we've discovered in England, you know, this road's got a little bit longer to run yet. So what I just want to do is kind of capture for you my experiences of the last 15 months. I'm a teacher by background and still by heart. I've worked in various pockets of the education system all my career. I had, it seemed, a perfect year's work mapped out around about last February. And then, of course, this happened. And I kind of thought, well, you know what? I've always said I'm going to write something. There's nothing else to do now. And there is something really to capture. So I'll try and give you some headlines from that in the next 20 minutes or so. There is no requirement to agree. And I would really welcome your feedback. And I don't know what the regulations on your recording are, and I totally respect that. But if I was able to get that snippet, certainly of Paul's introduction this evening, that would be great, because that underlines to me exactly why we need to take this as an opportunity in spite of the loss. It's certainly not one or the other. So there's the subliminal advertising slide. We'll move on straight onto the detail.
Sorry, Tony, to interrupt you. Would you mind just sharing the screen so everybody can see your presentation?
Okay. Right. Okay, guys. Apologies about that. I'm not going to take it back to full screen if that's okay. I'm assuming that you can see that the slide that's dominating my screen is dominating yours. Just want to say something very quickly about the process. The book was contracted on the 1st of June. This was after I'd gone back to a publisher with a proposal that I'd submitted to them a couple of months before lockdown on the future of schooling. And they'd been very enthusiastic initially, and then the lines had gone dead. So I went back to them in early lockdown and said, I really have got the time to write that book now. And somebody had moved on from the company. It had got lost in the cracks, but they picked it up again. They were incredibly positive, but they said, we kind of think there's two books here. We think there's a book about lockdown, and then there's a book about the future of schooling. And so they asked me how quick I could turn the book around. We were contracted on the 1st of June, and the text was submitted on the 1st of September. We held 10 focus groups and 16 face-to-face interviews. We made a number of recommendations. The reason why I emphasize that is that the book was kind of written in real time. So what it was a classic piece of research where you kind of look back at a period in the round, you study, you do your research, you do your literature review, you do your primary research, you then bring it all together and you publish something usually 2 or 3 years later. This was written as happening. And of course, when I sent the text off on the 31st of August, or pressed send on the 31st of August last year, I thought kind of that was it really. We were being encouraged over here to eat out to help out. Pretty quickly, eat out to help out became drink up and get out. And the rest is kind of history. And within a relatively short period, we'd agreed in principle that the book needed a sequel to take us through this academic year. And that's the book that I'm now writing, Bubble Schools, The Long Road from Lockdown, a road that looks to have got just a little bit longer this morning. So again, just a set of process, and that book 3 reference down there is the one that I planned to write in the beginning, which really is about asking what kind of schooling do we want? And I couldn't agree more with Paul's comment that we concentrate so much on the what and the how and so little on the why. I think what's interesting though with lockdown is that sometimes we haven't asked the why because we haven't been sure there's a how. And what has happened for me with the profession over the last 15 months or so is suddenly the how has given us so many more options. And therefore, we're able to ask the questions about why that maybe we've shied off from. Because the answer, we couldn't possibly do that, or you couldn't organise it, or how would you get those people together, no longer holds. And so what I wanted to do, and what I hope we've done in Lessons from Lockdown, and I hope we will do in Bubble Schools, is kind of capture the feeling of the profession going through this, and also the feeling of parents and students. We've had parents groups, and we've had groups for children and young people. We're about to have the children and young people's one towards the end of this term. Very interested perhaps in some of your young people becoming engaged, but maybe we can look at that afterwards. So I just really want to go to the headlines. These are the headlines, first of all, from Lessons from Lockdown. So these are kind of in print. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them. The ones that I'll give on Bubble Schools aren't in print yet, and are very, very malleable and up for discussion. The first, headline. And by the way, a lot of these headlines won't tell us anything we don't know, but maybe they'll emphasize things that we've forgotten or we've dealt with in a different way. I'm just checking because I haven't heard anything. I'm hoping everybody can still hear me.
Yes, I can hear, Tony.
That's good. I heard one yes there. That'll do. I'll take one yes for all. So the first is that schools have multiple functions. Now, as if we didn't know this, but let's just think about it for a moment. Of course, they have an educational function, but boy, don't we know now they have a socioeconomic function. I mean, that's so wrapped up in the history of the beginnings of universal schooling in the Industrial Revolution, of course. And I don't know about you, but I was always irritated on those snow day reports where some people would be interviewed, invariably for some reason in a bleak looking 1960s shopping arcade. And these parents would be asked about how they were dealing with the snow, and they would say, it's a disaster. The schools are closed, so we can't go to work. And, you know, the teacher in me always wanted to sort of shout back at the telly, I'm not here to look after your children. I'm here to educate them, as if I had some kind of higher, noble purpose. But the truth is, I think, and Danny Coyle, one of the fantastic head teachers, who spoke to us in the writing lessons from lockdown, said to me very early on, and Danny was doing, you know, the whole support package in terms of local food banks and ensuring families were well and all the rest of it. Many of you will have done the same, but he really was doing the whole bit. And he said, you know, Tony, he said, if schools are going to do all of this stuff, instead of resenting doing it, why don't we just ask for some credit for doing it? Why don't we get acknowledged for it? So schools with educational function, a socioeconomic function, a social function in terms of children mixing together. I'll come to this later, but I'm not overly, I don't want to sound flippant here, but I'm not overly worried that they will have missed X amount of any of our subjects, because we have stated curriculums, we have means to address gaps and so on. They may be expensive, they may be time consuming, they may not be ideal. But I've got no idea on how a 6-year-old catches up on a year's missed play dates. I've got no idea on how a 14-year-old catches up on not jostling in the corridor or the staircase because of our shared incredibly well organized social distancing. So the social function of schooling, just as we found with the social function of workplaces, you know, whether we're talking about the mines or the whole range of kind of smokestack industries that we've seen disappear over the last 30 or 40 years, the social function of schooling, like the social function of work for the young people, is vital. And also, particularly with primary schools, schools as community hubs, the meetings at the school gate and that kind of thing. So the multiple functions thing. Secondly, I don't think COVID has caused the gaps in attainment, the poverty, the differential experiences, etc., that it's exposed. It may have worsened them. It will have worsened them for some families and some children. It has had a disproportionate impact. But actually, those gaps were there beforehand. If we just go back to where we were, we're going back to the gaps we had. COVID has shone a light on those. They wouldn't listen to Basil Bernstein 50 years ago. You can hear the sociology teacher in me. But they would listen to Marcus Rashford. So maybe at last, when we say poverty, people don't shout back at us excuse, that they understand we're not making excuses at all, but we are giving some explanation and we do need some extra support. Thirdly, every child and every family has had a different lockdown. This kind of thing of it being a universal this or a universal that, I feel they're completely wide of the mark. And the research for the second book is reinforcing that. And in that context, and this, remember, was looking at the the first lockdown through to August 2020, but I'm not getting any different messages this time. Indeed, these are getting confirmed. That when I was trying to get my head around this, I was noticing that some people were rather enjoying lockdown. Some people were struggling. Most of us were just getting through. I initially had this idea that these were three categories of people. They weren't. There were three types of experience through which we were all moving. So at times we were all lockdown strugglers. At time we were all lockdown surviving. Most of us in that mode most of the time. And sometimes we were lockdown thriving. We were discovering work without commuting. We were discovering, different ways of communicating and so on. And for the reasons I've said, the challenge, therefore, now in all of this is much more varied, much more nuanced, and about much more than just curriculum catch-up. And the final headline from the first book, all of these have been, as I say, reinforced since, is that system-wide, the creativity and the innovation has been incredible. The emergent headlines in the second book, Bubble Schools, The Long Road from Lockdown, is that, the first observation, and I think we found this in our group last week, was the sure-footedness with which schools moved into the post-Christmas lockdown was remarkable compared with the system-wide trepidation of only 9 months previously. Incredible that the profession, that every member of it, from its newly qualified teachers through to its system leaders and its school leaders, had a sure-footedness second time around that I found phenomenal. I say that as a parent as much as anything else. The notion that what we seem to be seeing is that new levels of digitally enabled practice are producing new hierarchies. You can already see with my struggles this evening that I won't be anywhere near the top of those new hierarchies, but they're changing staff rooms, they're changing governing board tables, and some of the go-to people who are the go-to people now were not the go-to people 15 months ago, because we thought their technical literacy and their ICT literacy and all the rest of it was a kind of geekery that was great, but we're getting on with our books, thank you very much. How that has changed and how it needed to change. And I'm reminded in a way of working with PE teachers. I'm sure there's some in the room. An oft, I think, marginalised group in our staff rooms. The way that they grabbed the opportunity of London 2012. I worked in the education team on London 2012, and I ran a CPD session that was fully booked. This is only the second time in my life, but was fully booked. And the latest person to arrive was 3/4 of an hour early. And that was PE teachers building up to London 2012, 200 of them. So we have, again, new situations, new hierarchies, new politics. Again, the challenge seems more than ever about more than just curriculum catch-up. And I'm hopeful on the last one. I'm hopeful that the new focus on student and staff wellbeing will stay with us. That actually we are beginning to say that inclusion is the prerequisite for achievement and attainment, not its poor relation. We don't do inclusion when we've got literacy sorted. We get literacy sorted for a far wider group if we build inclusion in the first place. And any of you who've heard me speak over the years will know I'm a scratched record on that. So the more successful we've been with the achievement and attainment agendas, the more successful we've been with the 50, 60, 70, 80%, the more excluded the 40, 30, 20 have become. And I think that COVID has shone a light on that. And then in in lessons from lockdown, we haven't got our recommendations yet. They're to come from our focus groups and the interpretation of that data. But our recommendations in the first book, very quickly, I know I'm out of time, sort of.
Yeah. 1 minute left, Tony, if that's okay.
Sorry, say that again, Alistair.
1 minute left, Tony.
I've got 1 minute left, right. Concentrate on diagnosis and social rather than curricular catch up in the first instance. Place SEND strategies at the heart of teaching and learning, more bespoke, more personal. Capture the positives as well as the many difficulties. capture the new spirit for independent learning. Our Year 5 and Year 6 students have shown levels of independent learning that previously our new undergraduates didn't show. Identify the specifics in our own school, different for every school, different for every community, and different for different groups in the school. Don't take the reintroduction of children as unproblematic. They've had an interesting experience. They've discovered new ways to learn. Running down the corridor every 45 minutes might not work so well now for some of the kids who've never given us a moment's trouble in our life. Just worth thinking about. And national, I've talked about rebalancing the attainment inclusion nexus system-wide, and specifically, and I'm really glad this is going to happen, I'm not claiming it, but I gather that major research, because I've got to look at the detail myself, has already been announced in terms of a longitudinal study. We have to capture this, and we won't capture it in a couple of books written while it's happening. We won't capture it in a few quick surveys. This needs long-term educational research, high quality, longitudinal, thoughtful and reflective. I hope I brought some thought and some reflection, but we really need a bigger step. So in terms of next steps, here they are. I leave them to you because I'm trying to use up that last minute. But just one phrase that was given to me by a governance clerk here in Hertfordshire who clerks 37 schools. And she asks each of our governing bodies, what are your COVID keeps? Now, she's not sure if she originated the phrase, but I said I'd credit Tracy Middleton every time I use it. What are your COVID keeps? What are we going to take forward from this? And what does our schooling beyond this look like? So I'll leave you with some questions. I'll stop there and perhaps take some questions, Alistair. Does that work for you?
Yeah, thanks very much, Tony. Maybe if people have questions, they can pop them in the chat because we'll need to move on to the next part of the presentation there now, if you don't mind. But thank you very much, Tony, for setting that broader context. And I think it's useful for us to remember, just as we're about to go into sharing from some of the teachers from CALC and a real practical session of that broader context that we're in. And so thank you very much for setting that for us, Tony. Really appreciate that. But without any further ado, let me hand over then to some of the practitioners from CALC, and we're very, very pleased to welcome Jenna and Marion from St John the Baptist College in Portadown. So I'll just hand over to you now, ladies, and if you want to share the screen and take it away.
Hello, we are two teachers from St John the Baptist College, and would like to thank you for coming and listening to us today. I'm Marion, I'm a geography teacher, and this is Jenna, who teaches business and ICT. And our focus for today is going to be on blended learning and how we have brought that forward into our current classroom.
So our objectives for this presentation today, we're going to focus specifically on IT. So the blended learning approach that we have used in St John the Baptist College. And we looked at this through a variation of strands such as digital devices, apps, our school social media page, and simultaneous virtual classrooms.
So the first thing that we're going to look at is digital devices and how we use them both within our school and at home. We are an ICT excellence school and a digital schoolhouse. What this means is that we try to incorporate ICT in all aspects of school life and throughout all departments, and this then allows our pupils to make more informed choices on things like careers, things in the ICT industry and how they'd like to move forward with that. We found that a huge advantage that we had from this was that we already had made a huge transition with regards to using ICT within our school. And we already used a lot of the ICT approaches in our daily learning and teaching, which meant we made quite a seamless transition into blended learning. We have a school digital device policy, and we find that this has worked very well. It's a policy which allows students to bring their own devices into school in a structured and controlled environment so that it's well supervised, but that pupils can use their ICT that they have been using at home in class. We very quickly shared a Google Meet etiquette around staff, parents and pupils. This was just a set of guidelines, what to expect and how everyone was to use the Google platforms, particularly Google Meet. With that, found this was very successful because everybody was very clear on what was expected and what we were going to use, and it worked very well. If anyone would like us to share that with them after, we're happy to do so. And one of the most successful things that we found from both the lockdown and blended learning approach was that we have a Chromebook and iPad loan service. We're very lucky to have this. This is a service where students who don't have access to their own devices can loan them from the school. We have a feedback form and a parental permission slip that they bring in, and then there's guidelines that they follow on how they will look after the device, how it's to be used appropriately, etc. And we found that particularly with the second lockdown, we had a really high engagement rate from that, and students really benefited from it. And we've brought that again now into our blended learning approach. We have both academic and vocational pathways in SJBC, and particularly with subjects like BTEC, where they are coursework heavy, the students are still using those loan services and bringing this forward.
So I'm going to focus on the different apps that we use throughout our school. As Marion previously mentioned, we are an ICT excellence school. So we do use ICT in our daily lives, and it's also important that we use them again further in the classroom. So we use a range of applications to enhance and achieve optimal parental engagement, including, so we have Satchel One, which is also known as Show My Homework. We have our Instant Messenger, so our Facebook Messenger through our school social media. We use the Parent app. We also use our Phone Class, Google Classrooms and Seesaw. And as always, the parents or students could contact us through our emails. So it's very important just to note that having a variation of apps was really, really good, especially for us during the pandemic, because it has been good for parental engagement. So in SJBC, we used ICT as pastoral along with academic, so we could progress, you know, we could see the progression in their academic structure and also with their pastoral structure. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the Parent app. Now, I hope that's clear for everyone. So in SJBC, we are a paperless school. So all communication with parents, such as our notifications, our letters, class reports, and our surveys is completed through the Parent app. The Parent app is instant information, and you can sort of see, hopefully you can, in front of you, there's different information that is displayed. So we have information such as their attendance, their late comings, their assessment scores, and it's all there for them in real time. So if you have a little look, if the school need to send out any form of direct information immediately, the Parent app will be notified, and then the parent has access to this. So if you can also have a little look further, their attendance is recorded, okay? Obviously for confidentiality, we have scrolled out the student's name. So you're probably looking at those little boxes and you're probably wondering what they are, okay? That's what they are. So what we have here is we communicate with Houl through a variation of methods, and notably just in front of you, it is the Parent app. So this is an app which is accessed by parents and enables push notifications to ensure maximum engagement. It eradicates the letter in the bottom of the school bag scenario, and it does provide a wealth of information for parents, as I mentioned, the likes of our attendance, the school calendar. We also display data, reports, and achievement points. Through this, it reinforces our positive behaviour policy. So achievement points are also viewed by parents, which does encourage a positive learning environment. So as you can see, the Parent app is a really, really beneficial tool for both parents and ourselves. It's a great way for real-time communication.
The next thing that we're going to talk about is Satchel One. In SJBC, we don't actually use the homework diaries anymore. We use Satchel One, and all homework is recorded via this app. It's a great resource because it links the parents and the children, and they can access all of their work and deadlines on the app. Both the parents and children can be logged in at the same time on their own device, and it works seamlessly in that way with, you can see on the right hand side, Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams we are a Google school, so we share our classroom links to this, so it avoids the scenario of having to upload work 2 or 3 times to 3 different devices. It all works seamlessly together. And in that as well, you can upload videos, extra resources to support students that might be needed, and they can message you as well as parents on this for any queries that they might have. One of the biggest benefits for us as well, and how we have tried to focus on the increase of parental engagement, is that you can actually see who has viewed your homework tasks, so you can see if parents or students have viewed it and when they viewed it. This has been really helpful for informing us on parental engagement, who is working with us and how we can improve this. There's also a function on it which we are hoping to use next year, which is on sharing people's data. So this would be SEN information or any other barriers to learning. And with this, there is a sticker option which we're going to use next year. And this is to try and avoid the loss in translation between staff, so that you can click into a student and all their information from SIMS and SEN, it can all tie in together. We're trying to just make it as seamless as possible to avoid going from one app to the other and to avoid that scenario of things getting lost in emails. This will hopefully then decrease our barriers to learning and can ensure that all pupils can access everything, because that's at the heart of SJBC. The second way that we have done this pastorally was through FormClass Google Classrooms. We did initially use an app called Seesaw, but we moved then to Google Classrooms, and we found that this helped us with having a pastoral focus. Every day during lockdown, we used this to check in with form teachers. This is my Google Classroom, and the way I used it was through Google Forms. So I simply made a Google Forms on well-being, how the pupils were getting on. I allowed them then to have space if they want to write anything to me, any concerns or questions. And the feedback comes really quickly, and you're able to see who's responded. And we use this as a form of almost attendance to see how pupils were getting on. And I could then act on the responses to that. How I've continued then, now that we are back in school, I've used this, and it's really useful as a form teacher for very simply things like on Friday Sports Day. You can put in a notification that comes up on their phone, and we've really found that the students like it. They're using it, it's coming up, and it's in a controlled environment where they can use their digital devices appropriately. They are aware, as I said at the beginning, that we do have an etiquette of how to use these, and the students do follow it, and we find it's worked really well both in the classroom, and it works well with any students that have are absent due to illness or isolation. I can put in any notice or anything, and they can still see it, and they can check in with me emotionally as well, so if anyone is off isolating, etc.
The next feature that I'm going to talk about is my Simultaneous virtual classroom. So at the present moment, I teach 2 ICT classes during one class. So as I said, it is simultaneous, and how I do this is mine, as previously mentioned, we are a Google school. So I'm sure most of you are probably fully functional of Google Classroom. However, now that we're back in the classroom, it's a little bit more difficult. But what I do is I basically pre-record some of my lessons, so that whilst I'm focusing on one class, the other class are independent learners and they can develop and create their own resources. So if you have a look, I have my DTAC class to the left-hand side, and I have my GCSE class on the right-hand side. Now, it's maybe just a little bit unclear. However, each class has their chapters, and then their tasks are followed below. So as we previously mentioned, we are a Google school, and everything that we do, particularly in my ICT lessons, is posted to the Google Classroom to ensure that each child is still developing and they're getting taught. So as you can see, like, everything is fully organised and the topics follow through. And the next feature is we use marking for improvement. So we use a variety of approaches to give and allow pupils to engage with feedback, including Google Classroom. So some of you may have found over the pandemic it was really hard to constantly give written feedback. So there's a really good app called Moat, and what it does is it basically allows you to verbally record what your feedback that you're given, so you're not spending all your time typing. So it's a really, really good method. We also have an app called Nearpod, and Marian's going to explain that just a little bit further. We also have a homework marking code, 1 to 5. So obviously when you're marking, what we do is we give 1 to 5, obviously according to their homework policy, so 5 being really good. We have a trusted colleague network, and I think that's absolutely vital in all schools. So it's really important to note that we don't have a blanket approach. So each department uses something individual to their learners. So what we do is we like to share good practice among our staff. And as stated, we do have a trusted colleague network. This means that we can all work harmoniously together. It's important to say that when we are marking for improvement in SJBC, we are very open that we can say, this worked for me, maybe it won't work for you, okay? But it is good to state the different ways and that, different improvement features that we have included. But as I said, for me specifically, Moat was a fantastic method over the pandemic. As I said, we were verbally recording and you weren't typing everything.
And the next thing that I used, and this was something that's hugely benefits me as a geography teacher, it can be adapted to all subjects, but it was particularly valuable to me. It's an application called Nearpod, and how I used it was due to a lack of fieldwork opportunities, particularly at the minute, to bring case studies to life. And the example that I'm showing here is Yellowstone National Park, which I was using on the GCSE geography specification this year. And I wanted to try and bring what I was talking about to life with this application. It allows you to pinpoint places that you would like to visit, and they are then, the students can view them in either 3D or virtual reality. They loved this. It was really successful. It really brought what I was talking about to life. They're able to navigate around, in this case it was Yellowstone, using their mouse, or they could then write questions, or I could set up things, and the feedback was instant, and it's displayed in a really clear way, so I can see exactly who is doing what, and you can adapt it as you go along. I thought it was really good for anyone that's trying to pinpoint places or bring things to life. The way that they set it out, you just set up an account, and you can then either upload your own, and you can pick loads of places that there is, but this was just probably one of the best that I had used. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is our use of school social media. We use a variety of school social media accounts to promote our positive learning environment within our school. This has been invaluable to the students, and it's become a big feature of our school to really celebrate success. That students love when we share their efforts on our public platform. Their parents can see it, the wider school stakeholders can see it as well, and it's been a great motivational factor for our students. We use whole school and departmental approaches to this, including Twitter and Facebook, and Jenna's going to talk about those a wee bit more.
So just before we quickly wrap up, we found this year that using ICT to stimulate our engagement, so all schools are the same in this. So in the absence of our taster days and open days and parent-teacher meetings, we used our social media platforms as well as our parent app to stimulate engagement within our college. So what we did for open day was we had a live Facebook video, we had a virtual tour of the school, and we had a transition site that was actually dedicated specifically to our new year 8 students. So this enabled the children to have a little taster of what our school actually looks like, who is in it, as you can see in this little image on the side. So it's just really important to note that we do really thrive on using ICT. So wrapping up then everything that we have mentioned, what was the impact of using all these apps across the board? Well, we felt that we got higher pupil engagement rates during lockdown. We had enhanced communication with all our stakeholders. We had fewer underachievers as a result, particularly at Key Stage 4. We had fewer gaps in our student learning, and we had an improved level of discipline, self-management, specifically talking about our thinking skills and personal capabilities. We also felt that there was less risk of antisocial behaviour and a higher probability that students will follow guidelines. So Maya and I would just like to thank you very much for your time. Thanks for listening. And just in the little slide is our Twitter pages. And if you want to, you can access the Skills social media at St John Baptist College Portadown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jenna and Marion. I'm sure that if we had had another 20 minutes, people would love to fire a whole bunch of questions at you there, because that is such a rich presentation. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do contact them on Twitter if you have any other questions. We're going to keep moving on, and we're going to go from me right towards the end of my career, right back to where we start out. I've been teaching at Learning College for 29 years, and I got an invitation to accept a PGC student in here this year, and I'm very, very pleased to say that Miss Zoe White is joining us here, who is PGC student who had been working with us over the last number of months. Zoe, whenever you first came into Learning College, or in fact before you came in, we were chatting on the phone, you said to me, what are we going to be doing? Do you remember my reaction?
Yep, you kind of
laughed. Only to say that the most important thing that we needed to be this year was flexible, because we really didn't know. I need to tell you folks that within 1 week of Zoe starting here, I managed to have a wee fall, as they say in County Antrim, and I managed to break my hand. So I had to say to Zoe, I'll not be able to drive, not be in for a while, but I'll join you live if you just do the Google Meet. So lesson number 1, whenever I was watching Zoe, teaching away 28 year 11 students, and my senior leader colleague came in with a worried look on his face, and I thought, uh-oh, I know what's about to happen. And within the next 10 minutes, he'd been in 2 other times. And before we knew it, 14 of the 28 students had been taken out because they were close contacts of a positive case. Your very first lesson on your PGC, Zoe, how are you feeling in that moment?
Oh goodness, you're actually just giving me goosebumps just recalling that. Yeah, it was my initial thought. He had come in the first time, and my initial thought was, oh my goodness, there must have been a fight or something, because it was 2 students that were pulled out. And it wasn't until he came in a second time and then a third time, and I thought this must be COVID. So yeah, obviously being a PGC student, first lesson, you've just got your lesson plan in your head, and I have my lesson plan sitting in front of me, and I was just looking through it, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to get through all of this. Everything's timed to the minute, 2 minutes for this, 3 minutes for this. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to get through it. But it was at the moment when I started looking around the classroom, and all the wee faces, obviously they've got their masks on, and their wee eyes above the mask, they were just looking about the classroom like, what is going on? So it was at that point that my lesson plan and my timing didn't really matter anymore. I sort of just focused on the students in front of me, and I thought, I've got to get through this lesson and keep their head off what has just happened.
Yeah, so you're very absolutely picking up the emotional impacts, and Tony shared that with us at the start, the varying impacts that we've had, all of us, with this COVID experience. But you also realised then that within the next lesson for the next, I think, was it a week, 10 days, something at that stage, that you had to teach half of your pupils in class and half of them at home in your first week as a PGC student. How did you possibly manage that?
Yeah, well, from you had your fall, and I was live streaming all of my classes anyway. So I think your fall kind of prepared me, because I was live streaming all the classes anyway. So it was just something I was doing at the start of every lesson. So that was an easy sort of thing to get used to. But the more I thought about it, I thought, it's one thing having someone listen to your lessons, and it's another one having to keep them engaged the whole way through, and keep it all interactive. So obviously I debriefed with you, and I thought, how on earth am I supposed to do this? So technology was how we managed. Going through that evening, going at home and sort of thinking, right, 5-10 minutes, explaining whatever new concept it is, and then getting them to do a little activity on Google Slides or Jamboard. And it meant then that I was able to monitor the students at home, their learning, as well as the students in the classroom. So I think the students in the classroom benefited from this as well, because I was able to look at every single slide for each student and monitor their work, giving back either individual feedback or whole class feedback where it was needed. So yeah, technology definitely was the savior.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a huge part of it as well was your openness. As I said to you at the start, we'd be flexible. Zoe's flexibility in all of this was absolutely remarkable, inspirational to see. So having come through this craziest of years ever to be training, to be a teacher, and thankfully, Zoe, you've got a job lined up for next year. What are some of the big takeaways? What have you learned from this experience that you're going to take into your career from here on?
Well, I think the first thing I've learned is it couldn't get any worse. It couldn't get any worse. No, I think this year's definitely prepared me. Any challenges that have, sort of been presented to us, we've just worked through them, we've found a solution and just kept going. So I think that's something that I know has prepared me not only as a teacher, but I think as an individual for moving away next year and just facing that as well. Yeah, if there's any advice I could give, now some of them have been sort of touched on, but one, be flexible, and that was the first thing you said to me on the first call, you've got to be flexible this term. And I didn't really know what you meant until I got into the classroom. And then I was like, oh my goodness, everything was changing like the wind. You'd have all your lessons planned, we'll do pair group, we'll do group work. And then all of a sudden a teacher comes in and says, oh, these 2 students are isolating, you've got a live stream. So being flexible is the first one. Second, being open, and it was something that just sort of came naturally. I just had to be open to trying new things and trying new technologies, especially that the girls had mentioned there's so many technologies out there. I've tried ArcGIS, as you're a big lover, and it was brilliant. Jamboard, Google Slides, Google Earth projects, I've loved them all. So there's definitely not a technology that I'd say, oh, we'll not use that again. So being open to trying new things. And the last one is just reaching out to the people that are around you. Alistair, if I didn't have you as my mentor, I don't know where I would have been. If I didn't have the teachers from my first school experience, I would have been lost in that place as well. If I didn't have my PGC WhatsApp group and all the girls keeping me going, as well as my course tutor, Stephen Ralston, it's the people around you, I think, that get you through it. So be flexible, be open, and just reach out to those around you.
What a great and positive message, Zoe. And it was absolutely inspirational to have Zoe in with us. And I think you can probably see why. Whenever we've got teachers like that coming into the profession, we are in very, very good hands. Thank you very much indeed, Zoe. And it's time now to hand over to Julianne from Craigavon Senior High School.
Thank you very much for the invite this afternoon. We're looking forward to be able to share Craigavon Senior High School's journey and how we approached the whole blended learning and remote teaching period. So what we did as a school was we looked at formulating some groups, working groups throughout the school for the entire year, and that was one of the groups was an Edtech blended learning working group, which I was part of. We looked at different things such as School Cloud, parents evenings, and the Sims parent app as well. So not letting me share this.
Yeah, we had it up there. Julianne, it was being shared there. Yeah.
Sorry about this.
Oh, you're all right, don't worry.
The choice of technology and the...
That's it. Yeah, we can see that now. That's spot on.
Okay. And maybe just present it. Because
yeah, perfect.
Yeah, okay. So those are some of the frustrations that we all felt during our times of remote and blended learning and the sharing of the screen. So who were we really? The Edtech Group were basically a group of 9 members of staff across the school, all coming from different subject areas and with different expertise. And what we did was we looked at identifying different digital tools that you can see on the screen there that we would have been using, the Google Meets, Google Classrooms, Google Docs, the Jamboard. And we created how you would use them and where you would actually use them within your teaching opportunities. We created short video tutorials on how to use them, work booklets, so that individuals then would be able to take it and move forward with it. We shared how we would use these ideas with other members of the teaching team, and were able to disseminate that out across. Part of our role was that we were training the staff, setting up a central staff Edtech Google Classroom where people could dip in and out of, and it was also an area where it almost formulated as a help desk. If you were struggling with something, you could put your request up and somebody would be able to come back to you to help you out with that. We were resourcing the team across the school to be ready for a period of remote teaching, so it was really getting ourselves ready and equipped to be able to deliver that, as well as utilising some of the other facilities and establishing further the use of the Google Classroom to keep young people who were out self-isolating, to keeping them involved in daily activities. We really encouraged collaboration and working together, because what we really, and I think everybody has probably felt this across the entire education world, is that we're much stronger together, sharing different ideas, building the ethos of being stronger together, and sharing ideas, helping each other out, and being able to do that. Trying to keep everything as simple as possible to reduce those frustrations, which we all would have had at different stages. Was anything that we started to do potentially might have been, you thought might have been easy, but you might have come up across a few barriers. I was to try and keep things simple to reduce those frustrations, and then trying to encourage self-evaluation. How could we make things better? And using the triangular feedback of listening to our pupils, parents and staff, and continuously trying to improve on different areas. So that's basically what we looked at within our Edtech Group to drive forward the digital capabilities of the staff team, and to resource it so that we were ready for remote learning, but also to further develop our blended approach as well. We used different methods to connect with parents and guardians. We used the Sims Parent app, and basically that would have been a way for us to quickly, and it was an easy way to communicate with parents in a consistent manner, both from us to deliver a whole school message, but also was very useful for informing parents of weekly plans for subjects that you were teaching on. So you were able maybe to say, this is what your son or daughter will be doing this week, and to remind them of those, and also to follow up on pupils who maybe weren't engaging as much, that you could have that interaction. And one of the big things for us was the School Cloud Virtual Parents Evening. And basically it's a web-based video conferencing system. You don't need to install an app or download anything. It's quite easy to use. The information on your school information management system will sync over, that data will sync over to create the information that you need to create your bookable system. It's a secure system that allows the video calls that are made between the teachers and the parents to be secure. They're encrypted. So what you do is then you really choose the date of your parents' evening, how long you want each call to last for. So we had two of these. We had one for a year 12 group and one for a year 11. We started off with the year 11 group, the year 12 group, with a call of 6 minutes. And getting feedback from that, we actually reduced it down to a 5-minute call for the year 11s. So basically, parents are able to pick their times. They don't have to, obviously, they can log onto the system on their phone. I had parents that were working in the hospital, were still able to log on and have those conversations with you about their children. It also allows then for creating a waiting list. So you as a teacher know who actually wants to see you, and if they can't get scheduled in to an actual call, you then have got the opportunity as a teacher to follow up on those calls at a later stage, just to make sure that you're able to keep everybody in the loop. As a teacher, it was incredible that you were able to see in advance which pupils had booked the system, which parents of the pupils had booked the system. So therefore you could have been better prepared, instead of sometimes maybe when you're sitting in a real life parents' evening where you're maybe scurrying around to try and get the information about a pupil. It was very easy to be very prepared for that event. Each appointment runs to time, and it also gives you a timer. It'll give you the reminder to say that this call is going to end. And from a parent's perspective as well, it's also very important that it reduces the having to queue and wait, because sometimes parents maybe can spend a longer time with teachers. So that is one of the big things that we definitely will be taking forward as a COVID keeper. So our first experience of a school closure happened much sooner than the January period. On the 12th of November, Craigavon Senior High School had to close for a 2-week period. And that was it was everybody running to get everything ready at that point. And we used this as a real learning curve on how to be able to sustain remote teaching. I purposely left on a lot of gadgets that would ping so that I was getting notifications that you could empathise and understand how it might have felt for a pupil. And I know on certain occasions I was ready to lift some of my devices and leave them on the front door because it was constant, as technology is. But a lot of the learning, at that stage we were delivering live lessons, and some staff might have been delivering 3 or 4 live lessons a week on top of setting additional work for pupils to do. And at that point we were gathering feedback from parents, staff and pupils to find out how things were working for them. And coming out of that, what we really realised was we had to slow our pace, and we had to be kind to ourselves to make this sustainable. We set realistic expectations on what was manageable for pupils to be able to do, and also with the staff team as well, and making sure that we were collaborating and sharing and supporting each other throughout that period too, as well as taking that into the January period, and a big focus on keeping connected, because lockdown and school closures were a period of isolation for everyone. So the impacts then, if we look at it from pupils, staff and parents and guardians, basically there was significant impact. And some of the impact for pupils is something that they will take forward into their later life. I actually come from a further education background. I spent 16 years in the further education sector, and a big focus is developing work-ready skills and the flexibility. So our young people have a lot to be proud of, because they've been developing the skills that employers are going to be looking at an earlier age. They were developing their digital literacies, their respect and how they come into lessons, or how they can come onto live calls, how they communicated with each other. They were resilient, they were adaptable, and they did change. They were developing confidence and being able to speak out in live lessons as well. Not easy to do. Developing their planning and organisation skills, and becoming problem solvers. And in times when things maybe weren't working for teachers in the background, they were able to help us. You know, if you try this, so they were part of that process. Try this, and that'll maybe fix that solution for you. They were showing each other respect and coming in with that etiquette, which was so important. So basically, for they would have been developing their 21st work-ready skills. We had very good engagement, and that was followed up with those that weren't engaging, that you were following up with the Parent Sims app as well, and communicating on a regular basis. Pupils also received their achievement points for coming to live lessons and engaging in remote learning and submitting work. So that was an incentive, you know, to try and encourage them on that journey as well. So that, from a pupil perspective, there are a lot of very positive skills that they have learned, and they should be very proud of. If we look at our staff and the impact on staff, so there's a lot of impact. So some of them had said that in relation to their the parents' evening, that they were able to engage with more parents because the timing was very efficient. They felt over the past year it's been a positive experience for them. They liked the fact they could use Google Drive for sharing of resources. So you could see much more collaboration and people willing to share and work together in a much more collegiate way. You also had, it was much easier than the first lockdown experience because they were ready for it, they were prepared. We used different things, the visualizer. I think, you know, some schools have been using that to demonstrate to pupils how to carry out work. Using interactive collaborative tools was a super way of planning essay-style questions and getting young people to work together on one document at the same time. Using the Sims Parent app was very useful to send out quick messages to parents and guardians in the class group. Felt more prepared for parent-teacher meetings because they knew who was attending, and they felt that they were gaining confidence in delivering live lessons. It was all about developing that confidence too, and the school has moved significantly in the past year, providing lots of additional support. The journey's been steep with lots to learn, but staff have been very supportive and keen to share. And our parents, so the School Cloud Virtual Parents Evening, well organised, didn't need to wait in queues, excellent communication from the school using the Sims app really encouraging to involve the pupils during virtual parent-teacher interviews. It added a personal touch. It's lovely to see teacher feedback when work is completed. I'm very impressed with the school's help during this difficult time, quick to respond and help. So that was some of the impact and the feedback that we were getting from pupils, parents and staff. So what are we going to be taking forward? We're excited to embrace the next chapter of embedding EdTech into everyday teaching and learning and the school community. School's parent evening cloud is something that we'll be taking forward. Using the Sims parent app and actually sharing that now with pupils. That's going to be trialled. Further moving with our Google Classroom to support pupils who are not, who have to self-isolate, sharing and collaborating resources, looking for opportunities for flipped learning so that if pupils are maybe watching a short video or something before they come into a class, that you then can talk about that and refer to it within the next lesson so they're coming in prepared with information. Using remote Google Meets for remote revision opportunities and exploring Google Sites as well. So that's it from me from Craigavon Senior High School, and I suppose really the last thing that I would really like to share is that without challenge we don't grow, and this has been a significant period of challenge that all schools have had to face, and there's been lots of growing that has come out of education.
Thank you very much indeed, Julianne. And can I just say on behalf of everybody here, a massive thank you to the teachers from CALC who were brave enough to step up in this inaugural webinar and to share something like this. I suppose it's almost inevitable, folks, that with so many things going on, that if we really tried our best to keep the time with this, we are running over. And I've just one final thing that I'm going to be sharing, and I'm going to finish at 5, no matter how far through we get. So a 10-minute presentation in 6 minutes. Let's see if that's at all possible. Okay, here we go. Right, so I'm going to be talking about using what I'm calling the digital jotter to close the feedback loop. And I must say it is great to be back in the classroom again physically, not only when I wrote this in September time, whenever we came back after the first lockdown, but particularly because my second lockdown was somewhat extended, courtesy of my broken hand. But I say down at the end here, it's the fostering those relationships which are the heartbeat of what makes this job so rewarding. But right at the heart of the heartbeat of what goes on in a physical classroom is this feedback loop. Now I'm calling it here a loop rather than what we might normally think of as feedback. I'm thinking of something more than EBIs written on a piece of work or those comments that we write, hoping that the pupils will read them, and secretly we know that rarely they do. The feedback loop is not just us giving feedback to the pupils, but it's us getting feedback from the pupils so that we can diagnose how well they're picking up things that we're teaching them, so that we can shape how we're actually teaching the pupils in that live session that's going on. And Rosenstein says this in his principles: effective teachers stop to check for student understanding. They check for understanding by asking questions, asking students to summarize the presentation up to that point, or repeat directions or procedures, or by asking students whether they agreed or disagreed with all the students' answers. This checking has two purposes. A, answering questions might cause the students to elaborate on the material they've learned and augment connections with other learning that they're making in the long-term memory. And B, alerting the teacher to when parts of the material need to be retaught. It's that feedback loop. And yet, during remote learning, isn't this what we tended to look at over and over again? Is anybody really there? And yet I think I've found during remote learning that there are some strategies to promote feedback during remote learning that aren't just useful during remote learning, but are actually going to add value to what goes on in the classroom. This came for us in term 1 of this year, whenever we had to go to that blended approach, teaching some students in front of us and teaching some students at home using various means, including the one today that I'm going to be looking at, which is the digital jotter. So there's a little metaphor or analogy I want to to put front and center at this point is a dashboard. There's two things we can say about a dashboard. Dashboard gives you a wide range of information summarized in front of you, and it gives you it in real time. You're driving down a country road, 60 miles an hour, you see a sign coming up for a little hamlet ahead. You know you've got to get down to 30 miles an hour, and you need that information in real time. So if you keep that metaphor in mind as we go through, because I think what the digital jotter can do is act like this dashboard for us. The setup's very simple. I just set it up like that, name at the top, their answers, place for my comment, and then copy and paste, and before you know it, you've got a class set there. So I have, in 3 minutes, 4 things that I want to say about how this is going to be useful. The first is a little bit of whole class monitoring here. So this is an example of some retrieval practice. That's just whenever you try to remember material that's previously been learnt in order to reinforce that memory. So I did this for them. This is a little something we did on rivers, and they had to fill in those little yellow boxes from memory. And this is where I was able then to build this up into monitoring the students, because what I could see, and this is where the slides added functionality, if I go to slide view, I was able to see everybody's work at the same time. So instead of it being like this on their analog jotters, if you like, their little textbooks or whatever they would take out in the class, of walking your way around and monitoring one pupil at a time, we're able to do this. Now, one of my colleagues earlier showed him this, said that looked rather creepy, and I'm tending to agree, but you get the idea. So let's move away from that slide to this one. It's the idea of being able to monitor everybody's work at the same time, and that's the additional functionality of what you're able to do. It's that feedback you're getting from the students in order to feed into the work that you're doing with them. It can also allow you to address misconceptions as they come up. Again, Rosenstein says this, we don't simply repeat what we hear word for word. Rather, we connect our understanding of new information to our existing concept, what's called a schema. We then construct a mental summary. It's a gist of what we've heard. But when students are left to their own devices, many of them make errors in the process of constructing this mental summary. In fact, he goes on to tweak that slightly. He says the constructions aren't so much errors as attempts by the students to be logical in a place where their knowledge is weak. So we did this with them in something looking at coastal erosion processes, and we wanted them to find what was called hydraulic pressure, which is an erosion process that requires water to go into a crack. The air is compressed, and that's what causes the erosion to take place. Now, I'm actually showing you some of Zoe's slides. This is some of the work that she did. She designed this for the students using the digital jotter, asking them to find out where hydraulic pressure would be likely to take place. This is what one of the year 11s did. Excellent work, excellent work. But there's a wee misconception that's snuck in there. And the misconception is the fact that hydraulic pressure is happening up here. Well, yes, there are cracks up here, but the water's down here. So hydraulic pressure is much more likely to happen down towards the bottom. And we noticed that a few of the students had made that misconception. They had connected just some of the correct information, but not all of it. And what you're able to do then is give whole class feedback. You're able to say, right, guys, just listen for a wee second, please. I'm going to point out something to you that is something you need to be looking at. And then it's modeling effective answers. I'll just do this very quickly. One of the criticisms might be that with this, that the student can copy from each other. Well, this actually, again, adds functionality, because what I was able to do with these year 13 students is get them, once they had done this rather challenging task, to go and find what they thought was the best answer. Peer assessment. And if you've shared the success criteria with them in advance, they can go and look for these things. We then found what they had voted for the best answer, and we together went through and how do we look at what the qualities were of this that made this such a good answer. And they were then able to go and modify and adjust their own as well. Now, I'll move on past that one. So those are the values that digital jotters add to the feedback loop. And for me, this is very much adding functionality. And this is something that as I've come back into the classroom, we also have a very open bring your own device here, policy here, and that allows us to get our students to use their own devices to be doing this in real time. So this definitely for me is an absolute COVID keeper, to use Tony's phrase, or to use a good old Ulsterism phrase, definitely something I want to howl on to. Well, folks, that is us towards the end. I just would want to say again a huge thank you to everybody that's come along today and to all that have participated. I really, really appreciate your willingness to get involved, especially at the end of the craziest year and the longest term and all the CDGs. I just want to say, by way of a challenge to all of us as we move here, two things that I think, and Zoe touched on these, that have really characterized what's happened this year. We've brought an openness to new things. And we've also brought a collegiality and a sense of sharing. And what this session was all about today, this afternoon, was to put that front and center again, to put the teacher's voice right in the center of sharing good practice with other teachers. And the good news is that those two things, openness and sharing, are absolutely within our power. We have agency in those things. So we would like to say thank you for attending the first inaugural CALC Teaching and Learning webinar. We'd also like to pass on the baton to the rest of you as well. If you've joined here from other area learning communities, why not get involved in something like this? Why not let's keep those things going, those things that have marked this year, that have allowed us to meet this struggle and support each other. That openness, that togetherness, teachers supporting teachers. Let's take this challenge forward together. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. Thanks to all the schools and all the presenters. Fantastic. Well done.
Thank you. Yes, thanks everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
The presentations will be made available, folks. So the teaching and learning website that you visited to book the tickets for this, we'll put those up there. Then they'll be available for you tomorrow.